Hey guys, and welcome back to our YouTube channel, Mastering the Wedding Photography Biz.
I'm Hunter.
And I'm Sarah.
And today we're going to talk about Honeybook versus QuickBooks, two really popular and we'd argue important pieces of software for any portrait or wedding photographer, or really any creative entrepreneur who wants to run a successful business.
And even though this video is literally called QuickBooks versus Honeybook, we think that the answer is probably more of a both and type deal. So just stick around to find out what we mean by that.
So for starters, we're going to introduce you to both of these pieces of software and sort of their advantages and disadvantages compared to each other. So Honeybook at its core is what's called a client relationship management or CRM software. In other words, the main purpose of using a software like Honeybook is really to keep track of all your clients and their jobs at any one time, all in one place.
And while Honeybook isn't the only way of tracking your client relationships, having some method of keeping track of all your clients and where they are in your customer workflow is incredibly important.
So some clients are still deciding whether or not to book you, while others have booked you, but maybe you haven't photographed their wedding or their portrait session yet. Some have been photographed and you're still processing their images, but others are past clients whom you've delivered the images for and you're all done. And you've got emails and contracts and image galleries and all sorts of questions and everything flying back and forth with all of these clients all in different stages of that journey.
So knowing where each client is in that workflow and how you should be interacting with your different clients in different stages of their journey is actually what our workflow workshop next week is all about. More info at that link. But in that workshop, we do mention Honeybook as a great tool to manage all of your clients.
And Honeybook allows us to give each client their own workspace where we can email each other back and forth and sort of keep all of our communication in one place. We can also share their invoices, their contracts, collect payments, doing all of that in one singular place. And so over the last 5+ years that we've been with Honeybook, we've had almost 1,500 leads come through our Honeybook CRM, and about 300 of those have gone through our full workflow and automation just using Honeybook.
Which, speaking of automations, that's one of the most powerful parts of Honeybook, other than keeping track of emails and contracts in one place. Once we created our client workflow,
which, by the way, is the exact workflow that we're going to be talking about next week in that workshop,
we were able to turn that workflow into an automation using Honeybook.
So, for example, when someone inquires on our wedding website, Honeybook will automatically create a new portal for that client and then send us a notification, pull up our wedding inquiry response email template, and then add the lead's name to it. So literally all we have to do is just make sure that it makes sense with our schedule and our pricing, customize a few details, and click send.
Another example is 60 days before one of our clients' weddings. When we hit that 60-day out milestone, Honeybook will automatically let us know that it's time to send out our pre-wedding questionnaire. It'll bring up our hey, it's time for us to start gathering those final details email template and attach a blank questionnaire that's just ready to send out. All we have to do is click send, and that step in the workflow is done.
And trust us, when we photographed more than 125 weddings and portrait sessions in a single year, we were very glad for some sort of software that helped us keep track of everything, of where everyone was, of who needed what, and what we had to be doing at any given point. And by the way, the workflows, automation, client portals, contracts, these are all things that QuickBooks doesn't do.
However, it's the finance side of Honeybook that starts to pale in comparison to an accounting software like QuickBooks. While you can accept credit card payments through Honeybook for just a small fee, just like you can with QuickBooks, that's really where the comparison ends.
So sure, Honeybook's bookkeeping features are good, but they are pretty basic. Your income obviously is automatically tracked since Honeybook is usually where you're collecting it. And you can input expenses or income that you get from other sources. And likewise, you can either manually input your business's expenses, or you can even automatically import them from like a business credit card or a business banking account.
However, you can't do more advanced accounting like reconciliation or journal entries to just correct past mistakes. Sure, Honeybook can show you your profit and loss statement, which is probably the most helpful financial report to a solopreneur. It can't do other reports like balance sheet or cash flow projections.
And considering Honeybook is pretty expensive at $400 a year, we know that for a lot of newer photographers especially, it just doesn't quite make sense for them yet. And so if you're not at the point yet where you feel like automations would be really useful to you, or that you really need help keeping track of all these jobs you have going at once, then maybe that's the big con of Honeybook, is just that it is a little bit on the pricier side.
But all of that being said, as a CRM more so than an accounting software, we think that Honeybook is totally worth the investment.
Absolutely.
And you can even get 50% off your first year using the link you see on the screen and in the description. You can even try it for free for a week.
So all of that information is focused mostly on Honeybook. But what about QuickBooks?
What about QuickBooks? Well, Honeybook shines on the client relationship side, but is pretty simple on the accounting side. QuickBooks is the exact opposite. Intuit's QuickBooks is an incredibly powerful tool for all things bookkeeping and accounting, but it has almost no client-facing features.
And when it comes to accounting, QuickBooks really is the gold standard. I can remember back to when I was growing up, my parents ran their own small business of like 15 to 20 people in the town where we grew up. And sometimes in the late 90s, maybe early thousands, they decided to switch their bookkeeping from what used to be literal physical books with, graphing paper on every page to a software on the computer. And when they did, it was QuickBooks that they were switching to.
And QuickBooks is still one of the most common softwares used by accountants as well as small business owners for bookkeeping, reconciliation, and payroll.
So nowadays we use QuickBooks for a couple of reasons, but the main one is really just to make our lives easier when tax season comes around.
Yeah, so for starters, we use QuickBooks for all the same bookkeeping features that we mentioned above with Honeybook. We either automatically or manually input all of our income and expenses. That's essentially bookkeeping. And we try to keep up with it throughout the year rather than doing a year's worth of income and expenses tracking in the spring, which is not fun, guys. Don't do it.
Yeah. But in addition to bookkeeping, we also do our own reconciliation each month. And so if you've never heard of that term, it's basically where you put your books, your QuickBooks or whatever it is, side by side with all of your checking account and credit card business statements, and you basically make sure that every single penny is accounted for.
And by the way, reconciliation is something that Honeybook literally cannot do. If you want to reconcile your books, you have to use a true accounting software like QuickBooks. And while this takes time each month, it saves us from having to pay an accountant or a bookkeeper a lot of money to do it for us. Plus, it makes sure that our books are just always accurate.
Speaking of accountant, that's another thing we like about QuickBooks. It lets us collaborate directly with our accountant.
When using QuickBooks, you have the ability to gain access to a professional accountant or bookkeeper.
Give access.
Give access,
yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you can too.
You probably can.
Yeah, they probably will sell you an account.
They're evolving.
Yeah.
That way, if you haven't been doing your bookkeeping properly during your first few years of business, which was our story when we first started our business, then once you hire an accountant, they can go in and really clean things up for you.
Now, this is also helpful if we have questions for our accountant just like randomly throughout the year, rather than having to give them like all this context about where our finances are and what he thinks our taxes are going to be. He can just pop in and take a look at our books himself.
By the way, this also means that come tax season each year, we just send our accountant an email saying like our books are closed for that prior year, and they do the rest without needing anything else from us regarding our business income and expenses. They just have access to all of it and can make adjustments if they find an error.
Now, when it comes to the cons of QuickBooks, it's really just that it is so specialized as an accounting software. And honestly, many of the features that are included with even the basic QuickBooks subscription are probably beyond what the average solopreneur, the average wedding or portrait photographer really needs. And so when you compare on the one hand with Honeybook, things like emails, contracts, invoices, payments, automations, all of that. And then when you look at QuickBooks on the other hand, which is really just bookkeeping and reconciliation, it sort of starts to seem like Honeybook might be the obvious choice for a lot of photographers.
And at $320 a year, QuickBooks is only about 20% cheaper than Honeybook with none of those client-facing features. So you can send invoices to clients, you can process credit card payments for a fee with QuickBooks, but that's really about it. And honestly, you can do the same thing with PayPal without a subscription.
So for all these reasons, if you really do have simple accounting in your business and all you need is just a place to save a list of expenses that someone else is going to reconcile for you, then you might get by just fine with Honeybook, at least for a little while.
Yeah, and if you do the bookkeeping well, Honeybook can spit out your overall income and expenses at the end of the year, and that's fine if you're doing your own taxes with like TurboTax or whatever tax thing there is, or if you employ a professional bookkeeper to just do that for you.
However, as your business grows in something with more complex finances, as you start to your business owns assets or you start to work with a professional accountant, you're likely going to get to a point where eventually QuickBooks is going to make sense for you. And by the way, that's what we do. We use both pieces of software.
Yeah, so for years now, we've used Honeybook and QuickBooks as tools to help us manage and grow our business. It costs us about like $60 a month to do both, which we feel is more than worth it to manage the finances of a business that does more than $200 grand a year.
And the good news is that if you do go that route like us and choose to use both apps, you can actually connect them together. And so we accept all of our payments with Honeybook so that to our clients, basically everything is happening in one place, and it makes for a much more seamless experience. And so they email us in the same place that they sign their contract, which is the same place that they make their payments, which is the same place that they ask us questions and review their timelines. It's all in that one client portal, which is run by Honeybook.
But then Honeybook will automatically record those payments in QuickBooks. We let Honeybook do what it does best, help us manage our client relationships, and then we let QuickBooks do what it does best, which is keep track of our finances.
So that's why we said at the very beginning of this video that it's not really a versus so much as a both of them.
Porque de los dos. But guys, that is it for this week.
Thank you for watching. And don't forget, if you do want to try out Honeybook for free for a week and then get half off, $200 off for your first year, then be sure to use this link, which is also in the description of this video.
Likewise, if you want to learn more about our client workflows for our wedding and portrait photography clients and just how we use Honeybook to manage all of them, really, then check out our workflow workshop at hunterandsarah.com/workshops or use the link in the description.
And of course, like, subscribe, comment below if you have any questions, and we'll see you guys soon.